End of the month and time for another review. Did that fool anybody? No? Okay, yeah, actually, it is the middle of the following month, or close to it, and I am really late on this review. But as you can tell, probably by my tired raccoon eyes and my Go Big Red shirt, I'm in Nebraska again, and you can probably see from the background and all that. I am back here going on tour for my book, Two Gun Heart. Yeah, once again, showing it to various places, giving some talks, etc., etc. In fact, I'm going to be in Broken Bow about the time that this hits the YouTube. But I want to talk to you today about this book that I've been meaning to review now for a couple months. I was late before, so September was supposed to be like already late on reviewing this, and now I'm even more late. I actually had finished this a while ago. Very riveting, but it just took me this long to get it done since I've been talking to a lot of places in Nebraska about my own book. Anyway, End of Pawnee, Starlight by Sean Ferreter. I had the pleasure of meeting him at one of the book signings when I was here in spring, and it's just appropriate that I'm reviewing it while I'm back here, especially because it's about a story that actually takes place in Nebraska. And frankly, I kind of love this book. This is, one of those near perfect type of books where essentially here's what the story is. It's a little bit complicated to tell. I mean, it's a more or less simple story, but it's complicated in that it's based on some true events, and oftentimes true events can be, a little bit complex with all the different characters involved, etc., etc. But essentially, it's a novelization of some wars that took place between the Pawnee and the Sioux during the Pawnee and the Sioux Indian tribes during around the late 1860s, early 1870s time period, approximately. And it climaxes with a massacre that took place down in southern Nebraska. What's particularly interesting about this is that the book does not glamorize anybody. I mean, we basically, one of the difficulties I think that we have in this country is we tend to have this point of view of taking there's got to be a good guy and a bad guy. It's got to be black and white. And like, for instance, if this sort of a story, because this involves, like I said, the Sioux, the Pawnee, and of course by nature also involves the American culture, the white culture, etc., because our nation was basically pushing across about that period. And this sort of a story, if it was told in the late 1800s or 1900s until about the 50s or 60s, it would be told purely as, oh, those savages, the American Indians as the savages or whatever. And then if it was told 70s on into the present, most of the time, most books and most movies would glamorize it the other way. They'd be like, oh, any of the Indians were perfect and pure and lived perfectly with nature and perfectly with each other, and the Americans just came in and slaughtered them, and they were all bad, etc., etc. This book, it really rides the line. It doesn't actually really judge. I don't want to say that it judges anything. It just kind of tells this story. And while it's a true story, it's a novelization of these events. I should explain that right off, actually, that this is a true story, but it's a novelization of it, so it fills in the lines, all that sort of thing. So it's told as a story, but it actually is true. And one of the things that's really neat in this book is what he does. He tells the story, but then he'll put like a footnote, and the footnote will give sources and specific information about what these people are talking about. So someone will casually be talking about maybe a battle that took place, and then the footnote will go into a little more detail about what that battle was and what his source is of like the actual story. So you can kind of follow, okay, here's the part that's actually true, and the rest of it, while true, is made into a novelization, into, a story type of thing. So we don't necessarily know those were the exact words that somebody said, but it's basically the story. So you can follow the really true aspects of it while also just seeing this story unfold. But what's particularly impressive here is that everybody's basically shown as the type of people that would have existed at that particular time. So no group is romanticized as sort of the perfect group. As an example of what more people probably would have seen, if you've seen Dances with Wolves, a lot of people have seen that. And this is kind of like Dances with Wolves, the realistic version. And before I get into this, let me explain. I actually do like the movie Dances with Wolves, but there were a few things that are just like, yeah, in addition to the woman with 80s hair. Like, for instance, actually, one of the sort of regrettable things is it portrays it like the Sioux were sort of the victims of the Pawnee, and the Pawnee were coming in and raiding them and attacking them and blah, 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 blah. If you actually study that history, actually it was the other way around. And I hate to say that because actually I've known a number of Sioux people, Lakota people, or Lakota Sioux. And, I've lived amongst them, and they've been, friends of mine, but in studying the history, I had to admit, now it was really more the Sioux going after the Pawnee and really picking on them. And therein lies kind of the genius of this book, because no group comes out as perfect, and no group comes out as purely villainous. Each group is doing something that's really not right. The Sioux are raiding the Pawnee. A lot of the Pawnee are sticking to old ways, and there are times when they could maybe improve and fix themselves, or basically put themselves in a position wherein they could defend themselves and survive a lot better and all that sort of thing. But there are some of them who are very stubborn. No, these are the old ways, and this is the way we got to do it. And there's, of course, the American government, which is filled with a lot of very greedy people and going in and trying to push in and grab the land and that sort of thing. But of course, then it's sprinkled with a lot of people that you like on all three sides. So you don't really get this romanticized notion of one group of people are perfect and these other people are terrible. It's a lot of unfortunate events like American history is filled with, but it also doesn't act like nobody's responsible. It shows the responsibility of this person made this choice. Some people who made dumb choices, some people who made evil choices, and some people who got caught in the middle. And so it's really good in that regard. It's one of those things where they don't go politically correct, but they also don't go like the other extreme of like the savages or what have you. So that's the thing. In terms of the way the style is really good. He really gets into into the characters. You can really believe that these people existed. It's very hard to write people from another period and from another culture. And I have to admit, there were some times when it was hard to get into some of the American Indian cultures. By the way, I'm going to get a little close to this light. Here we go. At least one side of my face is lighter. There are, sometimes it's hard to get into the cultures of some of, some people who are part of another culture. It's kind of harder to relate to the way they talk, etc. And it's very hard to write for them, but I think that he got it for the most part. As much as I can tell, there's a few times with the editing. I think with I'm still trying to find the light here. I think with these with self-published books, with independently published books, you do have to talk about the editing. It's the bane of what we do. It's the most difficult, most expensive part. And a lot of these books, you find them sprinkled throughout. This one, what's interesting is it's rare that he has an editing mistake, but when he does, it's kind of like they're all on one page. You'll come upon one page and there'll be editing problems, and the way it's written is just a little, bumpy and all that sort of thing. And then the next page will be perfect. So you get the idea, okay, well, there's certain days where he just had a bad day or something like that, and it didn't quite get corrected. That's minor. It's, for the most part, the worst thing one could say, about this, aside from the fact that it might be hard for some people to get into just because of the cultural differences, but that really is the only, difficulty. So the one real true, because I always try to have some constructive criticism with all the books, and here would be my main one. The cover. This is a really good book. This is the type of book that I'm going to actually, it's part of a series. I'm going to get the rest of the series. And with due respect to whoever did the cover, it's actually not that bad of art. It's just, I don't know if you can even tell on here, it's very pixelated. And this is the kind of book, typically we try not to judge a book by its cover. Certainly you need to read it, but the thing is, we all have to admit, we make a choice as to whether or not we're going to read something, or at least take a closer look by the cover. Whether or not we're going to really, look further into it. We look at the way it looks initially. It's human beings. We are visual creatures. So if if we see a cover and it's really pixelated, we're much more likely to brush by it. So my recommendation of this book would be to change the cover, fix the cover, at the very least get it unpixelated. But for those of you who are curious about this sort of thing, I mean, it's easy to think, okay, cover is going to be super expensive, etc., etc. And yes, it can be. It's if you're going to hire a top-notch artist to do an original exclusive piece, about around $1,000 approximately. I mean, it's real expensive, but there are ways around that. First of all, you can go to places like Dreamtime, where you can download art for not a real expensive price. My own book, The American Game, that actually came from a picture from Dreamtime, and in fact, I'm actually even going to change that. I'm going to make it a little more Civil War oriented, because all baseball and Civil War is what really kind of sells, and that's part of it. You do want it to be accurate. You don't want to just create something that's going to be eye-catching, but it doesn't tell the subject. So you can start with some of those images, or you can get artists who aren't quite as expensive. Or in the case of the next Relic Worlds book, what I did was I went to an artist who would be several $1,000s. Actually, he does some of the biggest stuff out there. Works for Tor a lot, but also he designed the ships for Guardians of the Galaxy, and he did artwork for Star Wars, etc., etc. But what I did was I found some of his older art that he now has the rights. The rights have gone back to him, and he is selling me the non-exclusive rights. Now, in this particular case, it's actually $700, but I'm getting some of this top-notch professional art for that originally went for probably $5,000 or something like that, for much lower. You can do it on a lower scale. You can also go to schools that and find really talented people. You go to DeviantArt, you find some of those artists. You essentially say, look, I have a couple $100s for a book cover. Maybe even you start with some art from Dreamtime and you give it to them and you go, look, I want these things altered from it, so they're not even having to do the whole thing. Or you can even say, look, I don't even need the titling on there, I just need this or that, this particular piece of art, that particular piece of art. So there are several things. By the way, I'm moving the camera from arm to arm because they're kind of getting tired and it's the middle of the night, and that's kind of why my eyes are the way they are at the moment. Anyway, that's how I would recommend. Actually, the back is kind of good, which I know it's kind of an odd thing to be talking about, but I actually sometimes struggle with my backs. It's clear, you can see the writing. Maybe I'd recommend a new picture or whatever of himself, but not a big deal. But the front cover, unfortunately, yeah, it's. And the other one I think I remember was kind of pixelated as well. I really would recommend that get changed, because more people should find this book. He doesn't put a judgment for the way that the people. He doesn't say well, these people were being stubborn and these people were being evil. He doesn't write it that way. He just sort of shows it, and you get to judge for yourself. In my opinion, I think it was done very accurately. I've done a lot of studies of American Indian tribes during this time in this area, and I think it's very fair to say, I think a lot of people are afraid to say different groups and different people made mistakes, and these people did this here and this here, and some were good things, some were bad things. Again, he never says this was good, this was bad. He just sort of shows it. But I think he says some things that some people would be like, oh, you can't say that. And he was brave enough to just say, no, this is what it was like, and here's where some of the mistakes were made. Again, I'm calling them mistakes, but he just portrays them, and yeah, they wind up leading to really big problems. And rather than just saying, oh, it was all the Americans' big bad government coming in and killing everybody, it was sometimes these people made bad choices. While at the same time, our government did go in and trample over people's lands unfairly and cheat people, etc., etc. So it doesn't hide from that either. So really good. I'd say, find End of Pawnee Starlight. Don't worry about the cover. It's really, really good. And any of the any of its sequels, if you see those as well, I definitely would recommend those. Next up, I just realized I do not have, here we go. It is going to be on my iPad. I will be back, not my iPad, I'm sorry, I don't have an iPad. I go with Android. And it's on on here on the tablet, Samsung tablet. It's from a vlogger, actually. A Texan in Japan is her YouTube show, and I believe that's the names of the shows. It's coming up at the moment. But I'm going to be doing that at the end of this month. Actually, it's only a couple weeks away, so you'll see it. I guess you don't necessarily need me to go looking for that. But in the meantime, be sure to read more independent books. I'm going to also try to put up a couple of vlogs. I know I've been saying that for a while, but it's probably only 2 of you watching anyway. Yeah, this is going to take a while to get back up. So thank you all for watching. I'll be back in a couple of weeks, hopefully maybe sooner. And of course I'll be back in Burbank, and hopefully my eyes will not be quite as blackened as they are now from no sleep. Oh, you know what? This is back up, so I can show you what it is that will be next month. If you can bear with me for just a moment, I'm putting on my Kindle right now. It is this book. It's a Kindle book. Oh, I just remembered. My husband thinks I'm crazy. And it's by a woman who's from Texas, who's living in Japan, and it's about her experiences with the culture shock. All right, thank you all for watching. Read more independent books.